Hello and welcome to this especially important and historic International Manifesto Group webinar on the US presidential elections. I'm Radhika Desai and I'm the convener of the International Manifesto Group. We have entitled this webinar Trump versus Harris, US citizens denied choice for people, planet, and peace. The webinar is co-sponsored by the Black Agenda Report, the Black Alliance for Peace, and the United National Anti-War Committee. So we are nearly there. We are nearly at the much anticipated, much fought over, and much dreaded election day, with the United States facing not only an historic presidential election, but rather another historic presidential election. Incidentally, it's historic for the International Manifesto Group also. The International Manifesto Group, as some of you may know, began meeting virtually at the beginning of COVID, and by the fall of that year, we felt that we were having some really interesting seminars, or rather discussions, and began putting them up on the web. And as the US elections approached, we were at the same time thinking, why not start putting up webinars ourselves, as many other groups and organizations were doing. And indeed, we began our first webinar was about the upcoming US presidential election. So here we are again, 4 years later, still going and hopefully making a difference. Those elections, the 2020 elections, saw Biden defeat Trump narrowly, and with the results delayed for days, repeated attempts by Trump to contest the results and uncover what he claimed were the true ones, and then, just before Senate confirmation of the vote, what Democrats call an insurrectionary assault on US democracy. And as we all know, it hardly ended there. On the one hand, in the 4 years since, the Democrats have spared no expense and effort to try to convict Trump and his associates for the alleged crimes, unsuccessfully. On the other, the core of Trump's base not only held on to its conviction that the 2020 election was stolen from him, but also nursed it into a festering rage. For the third time, the battle will be fought across the same lines. For the third time, even more wild rhetoric has been spewed from both sides. And as we see, as Dr. Leon is going to tell us, with some important consequences. For the third time, the divides of US society have deepened. And perhaps more importantly, for the third time, whatever government is elected, if, and this is a big if, the electoral process does yield a legitimate rather than a contested result, will prove unable to arrest this slide of US politics into ever more suffocating levels of toxicity. That divide that has cleaved US politics down the middle is one between the globalizing, neoliberal, financialized corporate elite and the people. There is a solid core of some 40% of the electorate that remains stubbornly inaccessible to the corporate elite. This has transformed US politics. As one political scientist pointed out, between 1920 and 1984, the contest between the two parties resembled World War II, with a high level of mobility and rapid gains and losses of large swaths of territory. By contrast, the contemporary era, the era since about 1984, resembles World War I, with a single, mostly immobile line of battle and endless trench warfare. That the division opened and deepened during the neoliberal decades is hardly a surprise. Neoliberal policy produced the economic inequality on which the social division, political polarization, and cultural fragmentation of the culture wars have all rested. However, this political divide does not, or at least does not yet, represent any advance for the popular cause. On the contrary, it has placed frightening obstacles in its path. For rather than representing a clear drawing of battle lines between making the advance of the popular cause easier, the popular side, the side of the people, is actually divided between those being mobilized by an unscrupulous counter elite headed by Trump and his band of maverick or lumpen or warlord corporate CEOs like Elon Musk and so on, and the discouraged who are inspired by neither camp and who will threaten to stay home in droves on election day. This is where our panel fits in. It's composed of people who have long been concerned about this problem and have been part of building a strategy to take the politics of the people in another far better and far more hopeful direction. In the current election, it is represented broadly, at least, by Jill Stein, and was represented, by the way, in 2016 by one of our guests, Ajamu Baraka, who was then the running mate of Jill Stein, who also ran in 2016. Each one of our speakers is part of a larger organization and initiative, in fact, many. What does this election look like from our point of view? What, if any, are the paths leading out of these darkest of nights that US politics has entered? What can we do to put US politics on these paths? This is what our panel is here to tell us.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.